The one about, say that again?
I saw a myth on there that talks about deodorant that was on
Oh,
your
yeah,
website.
yeah.
Yes.
Very good myth or bad myth, however you want to put it. It's an example. It's good. As it turned out, some non-doctor researcher in one of the islands was looking at native people, and he found out that he thinks he found out that there were very low incidence of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
While he was there, his wife developed cancer, so he came to the conclusion oh no, that's the one on the bra that the underwire bra can cause cancer. The deodorant one actually has been studied first in England and
Okay.
then other countries, but there's never been a correlation. There is one material in some of these deodorants that has been linked to animal cancers or in mice, but in extraordinarily high doses. With the deodorant, I just wouldn't worry about it at all. But there are sort of non-toxic deodorants. That's probably a better choice than the standard deodorant. I use
Okay.
Dial, but who knows what.
Yeah, I've tried to use the natural deodorants because of, I
Hmm.
was told that the deodorant could cause breast cancer, but unfortunately they just don't work for me. So I kind of take
Yeah.
my chances and I just, use regular deodorant.
I tell you, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I think the numbers are so small
Hmm.
that there's so many other variables. Forget about deodorant. Get your mammogram every year starting at 40. If you have
Yes.
dense breast, add either an ultrasound or an MRI. If you do that, you have a 95% guarantee that if you ever get cancer, you're going to catch it early, you're going to avoid mastectomy, and you have a 99% survival rate.
Wow. Wow. So, and another myth that's here is that men don't get breast cancer. And of course, we know that is a huge myth because men do get breast
Yeah.
cancer.
The difference about men is they can be so oblivious.
Mm.
And I've seen men come in with large tumors, sometimes with ulceration. They go, "Oh, I just noticed this in the shower." And I'm thinking, how could you miss it? I mean, it's a golf ball in there. But I think it's nobody wants to believe it. They just want to, ignore it and not. It's like you did initially. You didn't want to run into and have that lump check. In fact, it's a good lesson. You should have, and now you learned it, and other people can learn from your example because it's a perfect example of how we can do better, how we can make progress, how we can save lives, how we can avoid mastectomy, how we can get easy treatment with effective treatment, and not the kind of problems you get if it's more advanced.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so what would you advise? Because I know I've told women that have said, well, my mother had breast cancer, my sister had breast cancer, my aunt had breast cancer, my grandmother had breast cancer, and I'm only 25 or 30 and they won't do anything. What would your advice be to those young ladies?
First of all, get another doctor because that's stupid advice. It's unbelievably stupid advice.
Wow.
If you have a family history like that and your doctor doesn't say you need gene testing no later than age 25, then they don't know what they're doing. And you better get a copy of my book, Prevent, Survive, Thrive, because we outline every step for early detection and lowering risk and how to make sure that if you do have cancer, we can save your life. But
Wow.
the point is that there's a lot of women that are carrying this gene, this BRCA gene, like Angelina Jolie, and now we
Yes.
have 32 other high-risk genes. So I say any woman who has children, whether she's had cancer or not, but if there's some cancer in her family, she should be tested so that if she's negative, which she's highly likely to be, future generations will know about it. If she's positive, then the whole family has to check into it. But the chances of it being positive aren't that high. But now, see, it used to cost $4,000. Now you can
Wow.
do it for $200 online.
Yeah,
Just go to
it's so crucial.
colorgenomics.com.
What is that website?
Colorgenomics.com.
Okay. Um,
And you can do it by yourself. In our practice in Orange, we have people that walk patients through it. We do the blood draw. We explain things when they come back, but they have to, come to our office. So if somebody wants to know about it, for whatever reason, I would encourage you. I would hope that in the next generation we test at birth, because I think every woman needs to know. Here's the worst tragedy of having a gene mutation: is that nobody diagnoses it. Then you come in with cancer, and the cancer
mm,
is aggressive and more advanced.
Yes.
That is that's a failure of diagnosis. If that woman was found at age 25 to have a BRCA mutation, we would start yearly MRIs, and then at age 30, we do yearly MRIs plus 3D mammography, and we
Okay.
would see those patients twice a year because they're at very high risk. Some of those patients might choose to have bilateral prophylactic mastectomies and save themselves from ever getting breast cancer. And then they have to know about their ovaries because they're
Yes.
increased risk of ovarian cancer. So here's the tragedy, just like with breast density. We have these wonderful areas of progress like risk assessment, and only one person out of 100 is taking advantage of it. Most women, if they get a mammogram and it comes back dense, they don't know what to do about it. And the real tragedy is their doctor who orders the test doesn't know how to do about it.
Wow.
The answer is every woman needs to know whether her breasts are dense or not dense. If they're dense, she needs added imaging. For the average woman, that would be a screening ultrasound. Now,
Okay.
they have a law in California. The doctors are supposed to explain this. So guess in Orange County, they did a recent study. What percentage of women with dense breasts are, after 3 or 4 years now, are finally getting their screening ultrasound? I'll give you a clue. It's less than 1%.
Oh my
It's a tragedy.
goodness.
It's
Oh
a
my goodness.
tragedy.
And so no
It's a
wonder so many
failure.
women are getting breast cancer.
Well, no more women aren't getting the blood cancer, but more breast cancer. But they're diagnosing it late, where it's so much more involved. We need to catch it when it's early,
Early,
or
yeah.
with the mutation, we want to prevent it.
Wow. Wow. So what can we do to get this to get the word out there that this really, some of this could be avoided, some of this could be, like you said, early detection is key. How do we change the mindsets?
Well, I've been so frustrated that a few years ago I said we're not making any progress. I threw up my hand. I said, what can I do? And that's what prompted me to write the book, Prevent, Survive, Thrive: Every Woman's Guide to Ultimate Optimal Breast Care. And so it's really simple. You don't need to buy the book. You probably go online and look at it, but just follow the simple direction. First of all, know your risk. Second, at least start screening mammogram by 40. Know whether you have dense breasts or not. If your breasts are dense, know to get extra imaging. These are not complicated things, but the doctors nowadays are so busy typing on their computers, they don't have
Mm.
time to talk to patients about risk assessment and risk reduction and what is density, because most of them don't have time to learn about it.
Wow.
And if a woman isn't proactive, she is likely to be a victim of delayed diagnosis. Even if she goes in for her mammogram, they may miss it year after year after year, and I've seen this happen. And then on the fourth year, a big mass pops up, and the patients say, "Well, I did everything right. I did self-exam. I saw you once a year. I got my mammogram. How could this be?" And you say, "Because you had dense breasts, and nobody told you to do extra ultrasound or MRI screening." And it's a tragedy.
Wow. Um, how does obesity play a part in breast cancer?
Well, it is a risk factor, particularly for women over 50. It hasn't been so well defined for younger women,
Okay.
but obesity leads to lack of exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those women are taking too much alcohol. There's a lot of factors involved in cancer, but obesity has been correlated with an increased risk.
Wow.
And
Wow.
there's every reason to avoid obesity. Probably breast cancer is a small, sort of at the end of the list, because
Mm-hmm.
just the general chance of it shortens your life,
Of course.
and it shortens the quality of your
Of
life,
course.
and it the self-esteem. But it's just hard. I mean, the way I tell my patients to lose weight is just you got to stop the carbs. It's the carbs that are absorbed so quickly you get hungry again. You've got to really go more to a protein and fat diet where everything is absorbed slowly.
Mm.
You don't get hungry so fast. And guess what? What is the one food that has been proven to make you allow you to live longer and have lesser risk of cancer, heart disease, pulmonary disease, and autoimmune disease? One food,
What is that one food?
proven. Nuts,
Really?
really.
So
If you
all
want to
of you
pick one food
listening,
to live on,
the one food
just
to live
pick
on is
any kind of
nuts.
nuts.
Wow.
And they don't, even though they have a little bit of carbs, they have a lot of fiber.
Okay.
Fiber is really important.
Okay.
And they have all kinds of nutrients. But there's been a 30-year study that has looked at people who eat nuts versus people who don't. And there's a major survival advantage. It's one of the best studies ever done on nutrition.
So when you say
You can
nuts,
go to
any particular
yeah,
kind?
no, it turns out it's either peanuts or mixed nuts. Because the study started 40 years ago, before we had all these choices that we have now, and it showed that peanuts work just as well as mixed nuts. But
Okay.
they didn't get down into walnuts versus pecans versus whatever. But here, if anybody wants to look that up, just look at the name BIAO, BIAO, and put nuts, and then New England Journal of Medicine. It's the best study on nutrition ever done and ever will be done,
Wow.
because it's a prospective 30-year study with the 10-year results following the completion of the study that are overwhelmingly positive for the value of nuts. But other things are good. I eat a lot of chia seeds. I try to eat as much natural things as I can. All these things with fiber in them slow the absorption of the sugar, and carbohydrates turn right to sugar. So it prolongs hunger, the interval between after eating and when you get hungry. If you just eat a potato, you're going to absorb it like sugar, and you'll be hungry in 45 minutes. Same is true of bread and pasta and these other things. And that's how come people have so much trouble maintaining their weight, because they're
Hmm.
not eating properly. And all these fancy foods and fancy diets, you don't need it. You just use common sense.
Wow. So, what would be the best type of diet for someone to have to lower the risk of
Well,
cancer?
first of all, stay away from all processed foods. We don't know what toxins and preservatives, and if you look at the chemicals on most of these foods, a Cheerios box or Rice Krispies or that's just one example of things that are in a box or in a can. Throw them out the window, because they're all with processed food. Read the labels. The labels will tell you how much sugar is in them. You'll be shocked. And it'll also tell you all this list of things that you can't. I don't know what benzodiazepine means,
Hmm.
but it's listed on there, and nobody knows what it is
Oh my
except the
goodness.
idiot that writes the label. So just assume everything is bad. You got to
Wow.
get vegetables. The cheapest way to get vegetables is to get frozen vegetables. They're wonderful, but get a mixture, and they have a lot of fiber, and they have all kinds of nutrients. And then protein, get fish and chicken, red meat. I think we worry too much about red meat, but I try to keep it to a minimum. Fish is particularly good. Most people aren't too anxious to eat fish, but you start thinking about it and try different recipes. It's really healthy. It's a really good thing to eat. And then one thing you won't believe, that is what I consider to be one of my best health foods. Take a guess.
What is it?
Chocolate.
Really? Dark
Chocolate
chocolate?
is one of the healthiest. However, milk chocolate is poison.
Ooh, okay.
If you get 85% chocolate, where there's mostly cocoa and very little sugar, now you're getting some very healthy nutrients. It's unprocessed, and I mix 90% cocoa chocolate with nuts, and what a great combination that is of just delicious food, and it fills me up, and that snack carries me between meals, so I don't have to have a big breakfast or a big lunch and I really avoid big dinners, because then I go to bed early and I
Right.
reflux. So you want to have maybe an afternoon meal at 4 or something, but having a little snack. Now, I wouldn't eat the chocolate after 4 o'clock, because it does contain some caffeine.
Okay.
So I usually just have these chocolate. But you have to. What I do is go to Trader Joe's, and I get the 85% chocolate, and I get the 100%. This is the cocoa, so
Okay.
it's not the milk chocolate. It's very rich and black or dark chocolate, and you mix those together and then liquefy it and pour it onto nuts and break it apart, and you have just a wonderful snack. I put it in the freezer.
Mm.
I make a month's supply. I take a little stack of it to work every day.
So I know Sprouts has like the dark chocolate that's already on top of almonds. Would that be a good snack?
Well, you got to read labels. That's the
Okay.
problem. Everything you buy, particularly at the store when you're checking out, has a label that implies nutrients. So,
Okay.
so it's probably better than eating the milk chocolate, and you get the value of the nut. But most people have a hard time getting used to the dark chocolate that's very low in sugar and high in cocoa. So I know the place I get is Trader Joe's. They have 85%. You might, if somebody hasn't started it, they might start with the 70% or even lower, and then try to progress over time to
Hmm.
the lower sugar chocolate. But I think chocolate sure helped me lose weight, and I'm diabetic. I've got to be really careful.
Wow. Okay. So I'm definitely going to take your word for that. I think I'm going to go to Trader Joe's this
They may
weekend.
take you off. Yeah, I'm not advertising. You can get it, but that's the best price because I really checked it out.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I have a young lady that I've been helping. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she does carry the gene. She has had her double mastectomy. Um, she had some chemo, but stopped the chemo. And she changed doctors because the doctor she was initially going to was a little on the unethical side. But the new doctor said
Ooh.
basically that she's cancer free, doesn't feel she needs the chemo, but does recommend that she has a hysterectomy and take tamoxifen for 10 years. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Because she's very
Well,
apprehensive.
well, she might want to go to UCLA or one of the big cancer centers. They have several excellent centers, and get somebody to look at all of her medical records and give her advice. I'm a little reluctant to give medical advice
Yeah,
when I don't know all
all the
the facts.
facts.
But if a
Right.
second doctor feels she doesn't need chemo, I assume that that would have to be based on some very good judgment. Those ladies can be, followed very carefully. But she's
Mm-hmm.
had the mastectomy, and that's a definitive thing. And then we usually do that as soon as the patient's ready for it, or if they have cancer, we do have to do it right away.
Mm-hmm.
But the ovaries, usually we shoot for about age 40 to take the ovaries out,
Okay.
because these women are, and ovarian cancer is much more difficult to diagnose than breast cancer. Fortunately, it's not as common, but it's much more lethal because it's usually only diagnosed when the belly starts to swell up and accumulating fluid, because otherwise doctors can miss it so easily,
Wow.
and so often it's diagnosed at stage 4.
Wow. Hmm.
So it's better to get those ovaries out if you're at risk, like your friend that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, I've told her to definitely seek advice from medical professionals. I know she's apprehensive of doing the hysterectomy and taking the tamoxifen, but I told her, please don't solicit advice from anyone who has not had your specific situation, because, they might tell you something wrong. Um,
Yeah, we have tests now that predict in cases obvious they need chemo, we give them chemo,
mm-hmm.
but some cases are sort of in between. Maybe they need it, maybe they don't. And there's a test called Oncotype DX, and we send it off on those patients, and it gives us a more clear picture. Nothing is absolute, but the patient can look at numbers. In other words, what is your 5 or 10 year survival if you don't take anything versus how much you improve your survival if you take tamoxifen. So if the improvement is only up 2%, then you say, well, why would I take it? 2%, that's just, for most people, wouldn't be worth it.
Right.
On the other hand, if they say it's 20%, you say, God, you'd be crazy not to. So
Yeah.
we run into that quite a bit, and these newer tests are much more accurate in predicting recurrence rates, survival rates, and we can sit down and look at some real numbers, and this
Mm-hmm.
avoids doing excess chemo, but it gives women confidence that we're doing the right thing. It's not just based on the doctor's judgment. It's a test based on thousands and thousands of cases that have been studied by special researchers and come up with these conclusions.
Now, can you do that onco test after the fact, or is it something you have to do when you're first
You do that
diagnosed?
on the no, well, you could do it on the tumor. We don't. We always make that decision early on,
Mm-hmm.
right after, soon after they've been diagnosed. I've never heard of that. If somebody presents with a recurrence, then that's a whole.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to do the onc. What's ahead
Right.
of you. It's a big challenge,
Right.
but you don't need extra tests. But usually we give that early on. When we're doing treatment planning, do you need chemo? Don't you need chemo? Do you need a PET scan? There's a whole host of things we run through. Do you need radiation? Do you not need radiation? Do you need tamoxifen or some other estrogen blocker like an aromatase inhibitor? So that's the time to get it. You would have to consult with I'm not an oncologist, I'm a surgeon. You have to consult with your oncologist, and that's where you want to go to a big place, Cedars and UCLA,
Yes.
and there's probably missing a bunch of them, City of Hope. There's some great, great places out there, and that's,
Yes.
if I don't know somebody specifically that I know is really good and well trained and dedicated, has a great team around them, then I would go to some of these big places like Cedars. I know probably they're crowded and it's not as easy as your neighborhood
Right.
doctor, but they have people there that specialize, and they're great,
Yes,
great
that's my
teams of people.
oncologist is actually from Cedars. What are your thoughts, Dr. West, on soy products? Because for someone like me who had a hormonal type tumor, I've been told by some people that I'm okay with the soy. I've been told by others that to stay away from it.
Okay, so you're okay with what did you say?
So I told you I was ERPR positive, and so of
Yes.
course I'm told to stay away from hormones, and I do eat a lot of soy products, and I drink a lot of soy smoothies and shakes and things of that nature. So is soy really something that I should be concerned with, or is it okay?
Okay, this is a typical story in medicine. One time the doctor says, get soy. It's got a kind of estrogen that's protective. It's a plant estrogen. Get the more you can take, the better. Then studies start coming out. Oops, well, wait a minute. Maybe we should just go lightly on the soy, which is kind of what we think now. A little bit of, if you're going to a Japanese restaurant, you want to eat ananami beans. That's going to have some soy in it, or the soy sauce. Don't worry about it a little bit here and there, but you want to. I would advise you to just keep it to a minimum, and then you
Okay.
want to talk to the doctors about, Evista. There's other things you can do that protect. Evista protects your bones, and it lowers your risk of getting a cancer recurrence. And so, a lot of women will do that, and that's something you have to have a talk with your oncologist. Because remember, I'm a surgeon. I
Gotcha.
don't really spend a lot of time, going over those details with the patients. When they ask me, I give them sort of the general answer I've given you, and I say, sit down with your oncologist and let them listen to what they have to say.
Great,
But
great.
I would definitely advise them not to overdo
Mm-hmm.
with soy, but certainly they can have certain amounts of soy. It's just not something that there's almond. The best milk I think is almond milk
Yes,
because
yes.
it's why it's from nuts. Nuts are the healthiest
Right,
thing you can eat. Why
right,
not take almond milk?
right.
That's a home run.
Wow. Okay. So much information. You're a knowledge. You're a wealth of knowledge, and it's. I just wish more people could understand the importance of like you mentioned earlier, that if you're getting resistance from your doctor, then you should go to another doctor. Um,
Absolutely, that's a great point to make because some doctors are, maybe they're more interested in one thing than another, or they're just
mm-hmm.
interested in getting you out of the office because poor doctors now, these primary care doctors, I have so much paperwork
Mm,
that they don't have the time. Some of them don't have time to even look at the patient. They're on the computer and asking
yes,
questions
yes,
and typing it in.
yes.
And ideally, you want a relationship with your doctor. You want to ask about these things because if they say, oh, get a mammogram, but don't really tell you why or what the benefit is, you're less likely to get it. But
Mm-hmm.
if I tell them you need to get a mammogram and need to get a 3D mammogram if we find out you have dense breast, and also if it's dense, we're going to need to get the screening ultrasound. If you listen to that kind of advice, you are going to do 100% better if you just go out and get a mammogram, get a report, it's normal, and then don't worry about it. So you start at 40, you do it every year. You you keep doing it as long as you're healthy. So none of this stopping at 74, because I have patients that are 84 that are the picture of health, have minimal problems, but we do stop a lot of women at 80 if they're not in the greatest of health. So, but there's no absolute rule. But the thing is to start at 40. But if you're at high risk because of family history,
Mm-hmm.
as is the patient with the BRCA mutation, we start the MRI yearly at 25
Mm-hmm.
and then combine it with the mammogram at age 30 on every year for the rest of their life.
Now they could decide though at 25 that they would want to just remove everything. Maybe they have children. They could go that route as well, correct?
Well, you make a good point. The women with children, if you're a single woman, you don't want to have your breast cut off. I mean, you want to, and we can follow them very carefully with
Okay.
MRI. If they're under our control, they see us twice a year and they get the proper imaging. We do the proper exam. They do the self-exam. If they catch something, get something. They're going to catch it
Okay.
really early. But once a woman has had a couple of children, she says, "I'm not going to have any more children," and then they get diagnosed with cancer. They're inclined to say, "Take them off."
Yes.
You know, soon as you get me on the schedule and start the reconstruction then and there. And most of the time, our reconstructions now are amazing.
Yes,
One of the
yes.
greatest things we've had and the breakthroughs we've had in the last couple of years is women with very large breasts that get breast cancer. And what we do with those women is take a larger amount of the cancer out, what we call a wider margin, and then we reduce the breast and then reduce the other breast to match. So a woman who comes in who's 45 with droopy breast has a cancer, we take it out, we reduce the breast, we match on the other side. They come into the office, they're so happy they can't keep their tops on. They want to show everybody. I say, wait till you get into the room, please. But I can't tell you how happy I started in the days of radical mastectomy.
Mm-hmm.
I hated it. It was a mutilating operation.
Yeah.
Now we have surgery that can make a patient feel and look better than they looked before they had the cancer diagnosis.
Yes.
That is an incredible accomplishment.
It is incredible.
And it makes me feel so good to be part of that because I've seen the worst and I've seen the best.
Yeah. I actually had a deep flap. And I've been very pleased with the results, and I'm like, wow, and mine,
the deeps are very good.
Oh my goodness.
They're
yes.
Excellent.
And so, I've always had smaller breasts. And so, I was able to get them a little bit bigger, although since I've lost weight, I've lost a little bit of it. But my doctor says I can always do a revision because I still have not done the nipple portion of my surgery.
Yeah.
So I still have one more surgery to do. And then, the whole 3D of the nipple and all that good stuff. So, but yeah, tremendous strides have been made in terms of reconstruction.
Yes. Oh, it's just, my son's a plastic surgeon, so we work together as a team.
Wonderful.
He trained at Georgetown and we spent a year in New York, and he's just, just a great guy to work with, and he brings all the new ideas from the East Coast, and it is just so exciting to be able to sit down with patients who are young and really interested in, and even the older women are interested in looking good. I mean, a woman is healthy, wants to look good and somewhat sexy, even no matter what. That's just human nature.
Yes.
And we can make them. It is amazing whether we do the reduction surgery or we do the implant surgery or the deep kind of the tissue transfer. All these things are just major breakthrough things, and if we can catch the cancer early, save their life is one thing, but make them look and feel better than maybe even they did before they had the cancer, that's a home run, and we want to hit as many home runs as we can in my business.
Absolutely. When you do your surgeries, I know there's ways of removing lymph nodes without causing lymphedema.
Well, that's a very, very good point, because one of the tragedies of delayed diagnosis and positive lymph nodes is that when you take those lymph nodes out, and especially if you have to radiate, and especially in women who are on the heavy side, they're at pretty major risk of getting arm swelling. Now we find that we see a lot less of it now because, as you point out, we don't take out normal lymph nodes. We inject a radioactive material under the nipple, and then the first draining nodes, we call the sentinel lymph nodes, can be easily identified with a little Geiger counter. We take those out and do a frozen section. If they're negative, we just stop there. So the vast majority of patients, when we catch the cancers early, can have negative nodes. Those patients rarely get lymphedema. The other thing we've learned is to follow patients every 3 months with what's called the LDEX, and we can pick up very subtle changes in fluid accumulation before you notice it. And then we put those women on a sleeve and we reverse it. And most of those women don't ever get clinical lymphedema where you can see swelling, but they have to be monitored and they have to be prepared to wear the sleeve. And of course, we tell women who have had node dissections, who are going on an airplane, you definitely should have a sleeve, and you definitely should avoid saunas and hot tubs, because recent studies have shown that increases the risk of lymphedema. However, drawing blood and blood pressures is not a big deal, and that was a big myth that went on for a long time. You can't draw blood from this vein.
Really? Because I still, to this day, they will not take blood from that side. Wow.
Yeah, well, you're right. And most of the places, and in the ICU, they have big signs up, don't do it. And I think that's true in the ICU. You shouldn't do it, because sometimes nobody's paying attention and that cuff blows up and doesn't go down completely. And now you have an obstruction, and then that's going to make you more likely to get lymphedema. But the point is, we overreacted on it. Recent studies have shown that there's no evidence that drawing blood or blood pressure is an issue, and most doctors don't know that, and probably a lot of surgeons, if there's any surgeon listening, some of them may disagree with me. We still tell them we prefer the site that didn't have lymph node surgery, but we don't worry about it too much. If it's an experienced person doing a nice, clean blood draw, I think it's perfectly safe on the site of the node dissection. Now, if they have a diagnosis of lymphedema or have some arm swelling, that's a different story altogether.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was fortunate. My surgeon, Dr. Dennis Holmes, he kind of.
Dennis Holmes is such a wonderful guy. I'm so glad you went to him.
Yes, he was fabulous, phenomenal, and
he's a fabulous individual.
Yes, he is
such a people person.
Yes, he is. He is. He, of course, he removed 17 lymph nodes from me, but he does the dye. Yeah. And so I had no lymphedema in my arms or anything. I sometimes suffer from water retention, but I think that's of my own doing because I don't always drink enough water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes the water retention has to be looked into if your kidneys aren't working right or your proteins are low or various things. So that's something also to take into consideration. But with lymphedema, it's only swelling on the side of the lymph node dissection.
Right.
If that's the case, that's more likely going to be lymphedema.
Right.
And if it's the whole body, you got swollen ankles and things, then that's a degree of fluid retention that should be carefully evaluated because it may mean that more something medical is going on that needs to be identified.
Gotcha. Well, your website again is a wealth of information, and for those of you that are watching on Facebook Live and that are listening on the LA Talk Radio, that website is www.breastlink.com, and you can go to doctors and you can look up Dr. John West. Again, he gives so much information, and the website gives so much information. There's patient stories from women with various types of breast cancer. And we have a few more minutes. I do kind of want to talk about the various types. So I know I had ER/PR, but then you have triple negative. And what are some of the other types of breast cancer?
Well, they're basically 60% are hormone positive. And 40% are the other types. So of the other types, there's triple negative, as you suggest, and then there's HER2 positive. So we treat that group more aggressively with chemo. Usually before we do the surgery, we can oftentimes get the tumor to shrink away completely. So it wasn't until the last few years where we've had more advanced knowledge in chemotherapy, and we had some new drugs that have allowed us to be very aggressive about taking care of these patients with these more aggressive tumors. So the estrogen-related tumors tend to be less aggressive, but still a delayed diagnosis on some of these can be very problematic. And then there's the difference between invasive ductal and invasive lobular. The ductal is the more common type. That's what most women think of when they have cancer. But the lobulars are called the devil's cancer. At least in my book, there's a whole chapter on the devil's cancer.
Okay.
And we call them that because they're almost impossible to detect early. Now, that's changed because now with doing the 3D mammogram and doing the ultrasound screening, we can pick up very small cancers. And I can give you an example of one patient whose life was saved, and that was my wife. And she had the 3D mammography because she has dense breast. They found a little bitty cancer the size of the tip of your finger, and they took it out as an outpatient, and they checked the node, and it was negative on frozen section. So they did the intraoperative radiation, which is a major advancement. And then, unfortunately, the node was studied, and a few days later it came back as positive, so she had to have whole breast irradiation plus radiation under her armpits. But you see, there's so much complexity. Each patient is different. And you may know your friend has some similarities to what you have, but there's just no two cancers are alike.
Yes.
And so you need to go to somebody in this day and age that specializes in breast cancer and has a team of people, breast imagers, breast surgeons, breast oncologists, breast radiation therapists, breast plastic surgeons, and people who are very knowledgeable and know how to take advantage of the system, the newest test, the best technology. And then, for instance, in our system, we meet every week. We meet tomorrow morning, at Friday mornings, and we discuss all the newly diagnosed cancers. And now you get input. There's 15 people there. You get input from all the specialties. You develop a plan of action. Sometimes you give chemo first. Sometimes you do surgery first. Sometimes you do lumpectomy. Sometimes you do mastectomy. I mean, there's just so many variables. But nowadays, big centers have specialty groups like this, and that's what advantages. Now, there may be somebody like Dr. Holmes. I don't know the details, but I'm sure he's associated with one of the bigger hospitals. I think it's UCLA. And if Dennis is listening, maybe he can call in and tell you what. But there's an example of a guy that really knows what he's doing.
Yes.
He's up in LA and just does a great job.
Yes.
And he's got a great team behind him.
Yes, he does. I have one of my Facebook viewers has a question, and she wants me to ask you: is there any damage from long-term damage from taking tamoxifen?
There's probably some damage potential to anything. I think that the big thing with tamoxifen is that blocking estrogen is hard on women, and so they can get the hot flashes in the night sweats, and commonly we see vaginal dryness, which is very disturbing, and urinary tract infections. So sometimes you can just stop. So the average patient with not a really high risk tumor, we could stop at 5 years. If they have a higher risk estrogen positive tumor, we go to 10 years, and we're looking at some cases going longer, and that has to be individualized by the oncologist based on the newer research. And so we're evolving in our understanding. But in general, the benefits of tamoxifen are going to outweigh the risks.
Gotcha.
Women under 50 who get breast cancer have to use tamoxifen. Women over 50 can use, or way past menopause, can use what we call aromatase inhibitors, and some of those are better tolerated. And so, most of these oncologists that do a lot of work with breast cancer can answer that question a lot better and be more specific based on the individual's need.
Gotcha.
It's kind of hard to generalize.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're out of time, but I'm so glad you were able to come on, Dr. West. Again, you were such a wealth of knowledge. And I hope by bringing you on, it actually helps someone or helps someone listening that may need to see a doctor, may need to see a different doctor. But again, I'm just grateful that you were able to come on our show.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I am so pleased that I have this opportunity to share this information because, life is so hectic and it's hard to know who to believe. And it's easy to say, well, I have a lump, but it's probably just a cyst or something like that. If a woman just takes the time to learn some really basic things, she has the potential, just to save her life. And it's just not that hard, and it's not that complicated. But, you need to find a team that really knows how to take care of them.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. West. Well, thank you again for coming on, and we appreciate all the good information that you gave us, and you have a wonderful evening.
You too, and I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, we're coming to the conclusion of our show. Thank you all for tuning in on the LA Talk Radio app as well as out there on Facebook. Again, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but this was a very important show, and so I had to do it. And I truly hope that for my survivors that are listening, for anyone who knows someone going through breast cancer, I hope this show was helpful to you. And I will be doing more shows like this with more doctors and people that can give useful information, and we'll be talking about other cancers as well. Next week, my guest will be Miss Donna Crockett, and she's going to be discussing her one-woman stage play that deals with Alzheimer's. Her mother recently passed away from Alzheimer's, and we're going to talk about her stage play as well as Alzheimer's in general. So until then, thank you guys for tuning in. I love you so much. And remember that our greatest glory does not consist in never falling, but in rising every single time we do fall. Still I rise, still we all rise. Till the next time, good night. Still I rise, no matter what may come my way. Not built to break, I stand strong each and every day.
You're listening to Still I Rise Tea Party with Tarsha T. Rogers, only on LA Talk Radio.